Hello and welcome to another edition of the Watchful Citizen, a local cable access program brought to you by the Lancaster County Democratic Party. I'm your host this week, Benny Shobe. I'm pinch hitting for Jane Egan, who couldn't be here today. And I'm really excited to welcome to the studio Jennifer Brinkman.
Thanks, Benny. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Jennifer's a candidate for the Lancaster County Board of Commissioners, and I think she represents District 2. Is that correct?
Yes, that's where I'm running. So it's mostly Northwest Lancaster County.
Northwest Lancaster County. So thank you. That's one of the things I wasn't really sure it was. First, I'm going to start today, Jennifer, by asking you a few things about you. Where'd you grow up? Where are you from? Where'd you go to school? Tell me things about Jennifer.
Well, I grew up in North Lincoln. I was born in Kansas. My dad was in the Vietnam War, and while he was across the sea, my mom was living with her parents in Belleville, Kansas, which is just a little town over the Kansas-Nebraska border. And so I was born there, but when my dad got back 6 months later, we were living in Lincoln. And we mostly stayed in Lincoln for most of my growing up. I'm a graduate of Lincoln Northeast High School, and I went to the University of Nebraska,
Those
Lincoln.
Rockets?
That's once a rocket, always a rocket.
Go Rockets?
That's right, go Rockets. But I went to UNL, and I got a degree in broadcast journalism in 1993.
Excellent. Broadcast journalism. I know a little bit about that. So you born in Kansas, grew up in Nebraska, yay. What do you do for a living? What is Jennifer's career?
Well, right now, I'm the Director of Communications at a company called Tetrad Property Group. It is a real estate development company, and we're probably mostly known in Lincoln as the developer at Innovation Campus.
Ooh.
So we actually own most of the buildings on campus and then provide property management, and then we work in partnership with the university and then the Nebraska Innovation Campus Development Corporation on the master development of the campus. So we're looking forward to breaking ground on a new building here fairly soon, and look forward to the build out over the next 20 years. I'm
going to stop there for just a second. I've been to Innovation Campus a few times. It's a lovely facility, and I like the way you were able to save some of the existing structures from the fairgrounds. Are you fully occupied? You've building new buildings.
Well, if you haven't been out to the former state fairgrounds, what you'll find is that we have about 5 different buildings that have been built. Actually 2, like you acknowledged, are structures that existed on the old state fairgrounds. So Innovation Commons is a 65,000 square foot office building that is connected to the old 4-H building.
Yes.
And so we have several tenants within that building, private companies and some university uses.
Nice.
And then it's connected, as I said, to the 4-H building, which houses Nebraska Innovation Studio, which is a maker space that I think people are pretty excited about.
I'm pretty excited about it.
Because it brings together students, faculty, and the community to build things and to create. And so that's really exciting. The other part of that building is the NIC Conference Center. It's operated by the Nebraska Alumni Association, and so that space is used by the university, private uses, all kinds of gatherings in the community, and so that brings a lot of people to campus. In fact, I would say that most of the folks that haven't had a reason to come to Innovation Campus, they're usually on campus because they're coming to an event at the Conference Center. In addition to Innovation Commons, we have the Food Innovation Center, which is the home of the Food Science and Technology Department for the university. It also includes some private spaces for private partners that are working with that food science department, and then other private companies that want to collaborate with the university. And then finally, the other building we have open is the Greenhouse Innovation Center, and it's about 45,000 square feet, includes greenhouses and head house space where research and collaboration is going on between the university and the private sector. It's a really exciting place to work, because Innovation Campus really is setting up Lincoln for another kind of research and development renaissance. I think it's one of those projects like the Pinnacle Bank Arena or some other kinds of projects in our community that are really long-term visionary projects that are going to set us up for success and growth into the future. I
want to come back to that in a couple minutes because I want to ask you some questions about development and growth in our community, but I want to hit some other things about your county board. Tell me, you're running for county board of county commissioner, actually. Why? What prompted you to seek the job of county commissioner?
Well, I'll tell you that about, I guess it's 6 years ago, or maybe now it's even 8 years ago. 8 years ago, I was really lucky. I was running my own consulting firm. We worked on some political campaigns, but we also did fundraising for some nonprofit community programs in the area. And we were approached and asked to run the public engagement part of the, what was then called the West Haymarket Arena project.
Yes.
So we started in 2008 talking to people in the community about the project, about the plans to build an arena and redevelop the rail yard down near the Haymarket. And I had such a wonderful experience because it was a really great way to see how both the public and private sector, but people who didn't normally agree about certain issues. We had Republicans and Democrats, labor and business. We had all kinds of different folks coming and saying, we need to make a decision here in our community about whether we want to maintain the status quo or whether we want to look into the future and ensure that our community is going to continue to grow. And that was a really fascinating experience for me. And it really kickstarted my thinking about how we can continue to make sure that the public and private sectors are continuing to communicate with one another to benefit our community. So when Larry Hudkins, who's the current county commissioner in this
Yes.
district, announced that he was not going to run, I thought, this is my chance. This is my chance to continue to work on issues that are important to me. Benny, I also have been very active in organizations like the United Way, which is, again,
Yes.
another example where you see the public and private sectors coming together to try and benefit our community. And so I think those kinds of experiences really led me to say, is there some kind of benefit I can bring to the county board? And the answer was yes. And
Yes.
so I decided to throw my hat in the ring.
It sounds like a nice, natural, synergistic movement. That's the proper way to go to keep. The Haymarket is spectacular. I love spending time there. So that's been a boon for the city, and I think continuing to move that direction is a good thing.
Yes, I agree.
So, well, let's talk about the county board. I know you're running for county board, and I occasionally, when I'm channel surfing, see it on television. But what does the county board do, and how is it different from city council?
Well, the county board is a really interesting organization. You know, not only are they legislative, do they have legislative responsibilities like the city council, but they also have administrative responsibilities. So there are 5 county commissioners, and those commissioners actually have to work with other elected officials like the county sheriff, the county attorney, the county engineer, your public defender. Those kind of make up the executive team for the county. Now the commissioners have a specific responsibility, which is budgetary in nature. So they have to be able to communicate, listen, compromise, try to lay out a vision for the county, the programs and services they're responsible for funding, and figure out how to allocate dollars among all those very important programs and services. When I talk to people, and I usually only have just a little bit of time to talk about what the county does, I like to talk about the fact that the county really ensures that the quality of life that we enjoy is maintained, and then that allows other kinds of projects and growth to happen. So, you know, specifically the county is responsible for things like corrections, public safety in terms of the sheriff's office, or your infrastructure out in the county, outside of the city limits of, say, Lincoln or Raymond or Malcolm, right? They're responsible for maintaining those roads. They have responsibilities within the Health and Human Services area as well. So they operate a crisis center for mental health issues. And there are many, many other roles that they play. But I really talk about how critical it is to make sure that the things that they do are being done well and are effective, because they really do affect what happens to everybody on a daily basis.
I think I did a little research on the county board, and I learned lots of things. Some of the things you said, and you taught me a lot more just now, but I don't think the average Lincolnite or Lancaster resident understands how much the county board actually affects their lives every day.
Right. Well, and I would say the same thing. You know, Benny, a long time ago, I guess 15 years ago, I worked in the mayor's office when Don Wesley was the mayor, and I felt the same way then at the city level as I do kind of running for county board now, which is that on a daily basis, you could probably walk out your door and think of the kinds of things that affect your daily life, right?
Yes.
And so, as I said, when I'm going door to door in the district, I find that it's those kind of things that most people are concerned about. And so it's infrastructure. It's what do your roads look like. If you have a job where you are interacting with people who may have mental health concerns or health concerns, then that's a role that the county will also affect, because they provide funding not only to the city county health department, but again to the crisis center. They recently privatized work that the county used to do in the mental health area. As you may or may not know, Lutheran Family Services and Centerpoint are now providing a lot of mental health services in the community that the county used to do on their own. And I think that's probably a good thing as long as the county board maintains some communication with those institutions and organizations to make sure that the services are still being provided in a way that is effective for our citizens.
I think you're referring to the building that used to be behind the former Sun Mart over on 17th?
Right,
And that's
the
now,
Community Mental Health Center, yes.
now those are all, they're privatized by the two agencies you mentioned, still providing the same services to the community.
That's right.
And which I think the last time we talked about, I think County Commissioner Rabel was on, and that's growing every year. Is your budget growing every year? How are we paying for this? How is the county? Well, I've already had you elected and you're on the board. So
Right.
when you're on the board, these are the issues that you'll be looking at? Budgets for the-
Absolutely,
yeah.
sure. And I would say that yes, in general, I think as the community grows, you're going to see your budget grow accordingly. In the last couple of years, if you looked at from one year to the next, I guess for the 15-16 budget, the county saw about a 7% increase in their budget. I think most people think, and we've heard at the state level, a lot of talk about trying to limit that percentage growth increase in government budgets to about 2.5% to 3%. That seems to be
Yes.
something that a lot of policymakers seem to focus on. In this case, and I think we saw this discussed at the LPS board as well in the last year, is a discussion understanding how valuations work.
Right.
And so when properties are revalued, and that happens every 3 years, what you see is that first year a spike in terms of the valuation of property. And then the second and third year, when that reevaluation is not happening, then you kind of see a steady tax rate, or I guess valuation is what I mean.
Almost a third-year bump of
Right,
sorts.
and so sometimes you see those spikes, and then you see some additional investments by those local government agencies. And I think that's what happened last year. I think the county has recognized that we do have some long-term challenges that we need to address, especially in terms of infrastructure. We've heard, I think Pam Dingman has done a really good job lately of trying to make people aware of what the rains from last year and then
Yes.
continued rains have done to bridges and roads within the county, and that there is a funding shortfall in her opinion. And so I think the county board is starting to take a look at how do we make sure that we have the funds that can make sure those roads and bridges are open and are functional.
So as a county board member, when you're on the board, will you bring things to the board to discuss like that, or are you kind of an oversight committee, or?
Oh, I think you absolutely need to bring those things. And one of the things I think is important about being a county commissioner, when I just spoke about the county elected officials that have a professional role, let's say your
Yes.
sheriff or your engineer or your county attorney, they have specific roles to play. I think really one of the most important roles that a county commissioner needs to play is that they are a spokesperson for their constituents.
Yes, thank you.
And I think that that's a real critical role. And so as I'm campaigning, as I have been this spring and will continue throughout the summer and fall, going door to door and meeting constituents, potential constituents in the district has been greatly helpful to me in terms of learning about what people want to see the county address. And so yes, I think it's absolutely probably one of the number one things that a county commissioner should do, which is to listen to those issues that are being discussed by the people that live in their district. I think that's probably one of the reasons that instead of having all 5 county commissioners be at-large commissioners, but be representatives of their district, I think you have a unique position to play to say, I live here, I experience this every day, I hear people talk to me about it, and I want to advocate to make sure that we change what we're doing and we make it better.
You touched on a couple of things that I wanted to ask you about. 5 commissioners, each in a district.
That's right.
There are no at-large commissioners.
That's correct.
Yeah, and one of the other things you mentioned I wanted to ask you about is you are walking the district, you're talking to constituents. What comes up most often? What do they say, I'd really like you to do something about?
Sure. I think infrastructure is a big topic. People drive roads every day, and they know where those potholes are, or they know what traffic snarls they see on a daily basis that they would like to see addressed. In Northwest Lancaster County, as I walked in the Highlands or the Fallbrook area, many times the bridge over Highway 34 that would
Yes.
connect Highlands over to Fallbrook. You know, we have a middle school in Fallbrook, and we have a lot of students that live across the highway. There, with the addition of some commercial activity on the other side of the highway, there's a lot of interest in making sure that that connectivity happens not on grade at the highway, but bringing it over to ensure safety, and also to provide some connectivity for trails and other kinds of pedestrian uses. So, I mean, that's a very specific issue, but that happens in each area of the district, right? It's what do you encounter on a daily basis. So infrastructure is one. I would say secondly, property taxes are always a concern to people, and they're a concern to me too. When I announced my candidacy last summer, one of the things I talked about was the fact that there was a report issued 2 years ago that recommended several different methods of possible consolidation between the city and county that could actually affect or enable the county to reduce the property tax levy in some instances. Some of those ideas wouldn't save money and haven't been implemented. Some of those ideas, though, are much longer term. They're talking about the fact that as Lincoln grows and takes up a larger percentage of the land in the county, that we could do some more consolidation within our public safety sector. But that's a really long term, a long time to plan and ensure that all those services are maintained and then work the way they're supposed to. But there are lots of ideas in that report that I think are worth looking at again, and so that's something that I think we need to continue to pursue. I would also say that I think Lincoln and Lancaster County do an excellent job in terms of creating interlocals where they are able to identify places to save money and collaborate. And I think that we really are an example for lots of communities across the nation because we are able to talk to one another and figure out how to make that work. So that would be the other one. And then finally, like I said, you know, the county is responsible for things like health and mental health and funding for those types of issues. And I found, as we discussed briefly before we started rolling, you know, when I talk to teachers in the area, they talk a lot about the mental health and behavioral health challenges that they're finding in their classrooms. To a person, they say, these issues are coming up more and more. They are more disruptive in the classroom. These teachers, all they want to do is make sure that each child in their class is able to be educated. And so to be distracted by some of these challenges that these children have, that they are unable to address in an effective way day to day in the classroom is frustrating for them because they want to be excellent at their jobs. And so I've had long conversations about how is it that we can continue to support organizations in the community that help children deal with these issues, collaborate with the public schools to make sure that each of those kids is getting the services they need and ensure that every child is getting an education in our community.
You touched on a lot of things that I really want to talk about. I live in Lincoln proper, the city, which is in Lancaster County.
Yes.
So I think of public schools, let's stay there for a second, as Lincoln Public Schools, but there are several other school districts in Lancaster County. Is that fair to say?
That's right.
How does the county board implement or encourage change or encourage funding for those special programs you said that teachers needed?
Well, I think what they do is they communicate with each of those school districts. So in this district, you know, LPS takes up a large, you know, addresses all of Lincoln's kids that are in the public school system. But Malcolm Public Schools, Raymond Central, those are other school districts that exist. So a lot of it is communicating about, like I said, infrastructure needs. How are the road networks that the county maintains between communities? How do those affect, you know, those school districts that provide transportation to their kids? How is the status of those roads enabling them to transport kids the right way, right? And in terms of mental health, I think we have to work in conjunction with the region, another government entity that provides
two
funding.
Region 5s that I can't quite understand.
Exactly. But we need to work with them to make sure that, again, like I said, when I mentioned that I think county commissioners play an important role in advocating for their constituents, not only do they need to do that from the constituent level to the county, but then as we learn what's happening on a larger basis countywide, we need to identify where we see issues or problems that need to be resolved, and we need to take that message to the region or the state legislature. We have to be advocates for the county as a whole so that we can, you know, the county is really responsible, Benny, for implementing state policy through services at the local level in a lot of cases. And so when we are either short-funded in terms of state support for, whether they have provided unfunded mandates or whether they've changed policy that then has altered the way we can provide service.
Yes.
And we notice those changes and we have solutions we want to recommend. It's really important that county commissioners advocate for Lancaster County and the constituents here as a whole. So it really is kind of just a stepping, building block to make sure that we're then addressing those kinds of issues statewide too.
You touched a little bit on one of those third rails of politics or hot button, the taxes issue.
Sure.
And you said unfunded mandates, and that's kind of a throwaway term now, but the county advocating to the legislature. And there has been some discussion in the legislature of property tax relief. I think the governor's fond of doing that.
Yes.
So, and how does the county generate most of its money, and how often does that budget come up?
Sure, well, most of its money is generated through property taxes. I mean, the county doesn't have the ability to levy, a sales tax like a city is. We don't levy an income tax like the state. So the property tax, when you hear discussions at the state level about property tax relief, a lot of what I've paid attention to is how do we balance that stool between sales, property, and income? How do we do that? It does become complicated, kind of going back to the schools, between the local control of property taxes and the vast majority of those taxes support our education system, right? So when you look at your property tax statement, the vast majority of your property tax is going to go to Lincoln Public Schools if you live within the city, right? The county is going to be way down the list, right? And then the city, and then all of the other kinds of joint public agencies, or your Southeast Community College, or the Natural Resources District.
All those little subdivisions.
Each have that responsibility. The county has a really unique role because they have the ability to actually set the levy for several of those smaller organizations. They have to approve them. I think they do a fairly collegial job of trying to do that, but that is their responsibility. And so I think that when you talk about property tax and the three-legged stool and how we balance that, the county needs to continue to talk about why what they're doing and the services they're providing are important to their constituents. And I think you saw that happen during the debate this year.
Yes, I do. I did see that happen, and I still think people say property tax is a major concern. They don't really understand. It's a big lump sum, big nebulous property tax thing. They don't really understand what you as a county commissioner will be doing to protect their property tax. I want to ask you a couple more questions about the board itself. Do you have a general idea how many, you talked about all the subdivisions with the sheriff and the county attorney. Do you have any idea how many people that is, how many employees?
I don't have an idea of how many employees it is. Do you?
I don't know. I was just wondering, as I was looking at the little flow chart, thinking, wow, that's a lot of people and a lot of services.
Well, they do provide a lot of different services. Beyond the ones that I talked about already, they have lots of other responsibilities, and then they're also, they work in conjunction with the city in several instances. For instance, we have a lot of joint departments.
You said interlocal a minute ago. Would you elaborate on that term?
Sure. Well, an interlocal is actually a legal document that sets up a partnership between two governmental entities. In our case, most of those are between the city of Lincoln and Lancaster County. And so we actually operate joint departments in some cases.
Okay.
So we have the Joint Department of Personnel. Our planning department is a joint department. I'm trying to think of several. The health department is a joint department. In some cases, we actually utilize personnel from the city to actually do some work, and then that's also a joint venture in terms of like building and safety, code enforcement, and those kind of things. So there are lots of opportunities for us to collaborate in that way.
Reduce some redundancy in agencies.
Exactly.
I had not heard the term interlocals before. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, a county commissioner, how long is their term? How long do you serve as county commissioner?
County commissioners are elected for 4 years, and it's my understanding there are not term limits on county commissioners. So, for instance, Larry Hedkins, who's been on the board serving Northwest Lancaster County, he's been on there, I believe, since 1987 or 88. So he's a long-term member of the board. I think that other members, are more recent. A couple of them have been elected within the last 4 to 6 years.
So you also, I noticed, we just had an election recently, and you did not appear on the primary election ballot.
I did not.
Can you explain that to me?
Sure. Well, It's my understanding that there was a law passed within the last, I believe it was 4 years ago, so that and it doesn't just apply to county board, in any local election, if your name is going to appear on the ballot, but the results of that election won't change the ballot for November, then you do not appear.
Okay.
So, in my case, this race for county commissioner, unlike some races in Lincoln, we have a lot of races in Lincoln that are nonpartisan in nature, right?
Yes.
So when people run for mayor, when they run for city council, when they run for state legislature, those are nonpartisan races. When their name shows up on the ballot, their party is not identified, only their name. In the case of county commissioner, though, they are partisan races. So this May, on May 10th, I did not have an opponent in the Democratic primary. So I did not appear on any of the Democratic ballots. But I will be there in November. So please look for my name,
Yes.
November 8th. But on the Republican side, there were two gentlemen running, and so they appeared on their ballot, and now they have
Only one
have
candidate?
someone coming in November.
And thank you, that's helpful, because I was wondering, I looked for you on the ballot, you weren't there. It confused me a bit. So we have only a few minutes left. Let me ask you, we talked about a lot of things. We talked about education, we talked about taxes, we've talked about infrastructure. I want to go back to that innovation center and talk about the economic development. Lincoln is making a lot of lists as being a number 1 city, number 3 city, and part of this is because of our low unemployment rate and our economic strength. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what you'll do as a county commissioner to improve or to at least maintain?
Of course. Well, I will tell you that one of my number 1 issues is economic development and job creation. I think it really is the key issue to make sure that our community and our county keeps growing. And I think that's critical in terms of making sure that everyone enjoys an improved and enhanced quality of life. So specifically, in terms of economic development, as I said before, I worked on the arena campaign, and I worked for 2 years to make sure that we got that bond issue passed and that project came to fruition. And we've seen incredible results from that investment.
Yes.
I think there's a lot of other opportunity in the South Haymarket and in general in downtown where there are buildings that the city and county own that could be redeveloped, that again will be another catalyst project to make sure that we're investing. The government can invest in one way, by making sure that those pieces come available for redevelopment, and then the private sector takes over. Really, that public-private partnership is key, I think, for Lincoln and Lancaster County to continue to grow.
There was a thing associated with the Haymarket, and I always get the acronym wrong. So JBA, JPA.
JPA,
Okay, thank
Joint
you.
Public Agency.
And that's kind of what you're talking about now, isn't it?
Well, this would be just in terms of economic development, making sure that our governmental entities make those pieces of land or buildings available for redevelopment, and then allowing the private sector to say, here's what we think is the best use of that. In terms of a JPA, that's really 2 governmental entities coming together
Okay.
and then operating within a certain boundary that's set legally. And so, for instance, we have a JPA that operates the Pinnacle Bank Arena area. We have a JPA that actually is responsible for our new jail out on West O. We actually have several different JPAs that operate in that.
And
that manner.
the county board's one of those
They do participate in some
public
of those.
agency.
That's right.
Well, I appreciate you coming on. We were running a little bit short on time. You're still campaigning. I'd like to know, how do voters, residents in your district, get in touch with you?
Oh, sure. Well, so I have a website. It's jenniferbrinkman.com. That's Brinkman. I always have to spell that out.
I want to put an ER in it, like Brinkman. So, yeah.
So jenniferbrinkman.com. I also have a Facebook page, which is Brinkman for Lancaster County Board, and you can always reach me. What I want to do is learn more. From when I'm at the door, what I want to know is what issues are important to you. That's how I can learn to be the best county commissioner that I can be. And so I do have a phone number, which is 402-580-9610, and so I'm here to learn what's important to other people, and so I'm hoping that I can connect with as many people as possible.
Well, you did a good job here today. I learned a lot, and I appreciate it. And I appreciate you guys for watching another episode of The Watchful Citizen. It's a public access program brought to you by the Lancaster County Democratic Party. Today we had Jennifer Brinkman on, candidate for County Commissioner for District 2. Did you get that right?
That's right.
District 2. Our show airs on Time Warner Cable Access on Tuesdays at 10:30 p.m., Wednesdays at 6 p.m., and Saturdays at 12:30 p.m. I always get that one a little off. We'd like to thank Jennifer for coming on again, and we hope you'll come back after you're elected county commissioner.
It was my pleasure. Thanks.
And we hope you'll tune in next time for another edition of The Watchful Citizen.